In March, CIGI and Chatham House jointly organized the workshop, Global Economic Governance in a World of Crisis. Results of this workshop will be published in a special issue of International Affairs in May 2010. The following set of videos presents interviews with workshop participants to draw out some of the main themes of this discussion. Here, we've asked them to expand on the core theme of how and to what extent the global economic crisis has served as a catalyst for reform of the international system.
Well, I think it's a very important concept, and I still believe that then a good crisis cannot be wasted. How do we do it in practice? This is a big issue, and in fact in the workshop we talk extensively about policy cooperation, policy coordination, and why it is important to use all possible tools to make certainly the main players in the game to talk to each other. But then we know the limits of some of these tools, we discussed them at length, and I don't think we have yet an answer, but this is probably something for a future research agenda.
I guess one of the reasons I wrote that paper was that I was quite excited at the time of the first G20 summit. It seemed like here we were in a momentous financial crisis and with what seemed to be quite a dramatic change of political leaders' interest in doing major global financial reform. And so it was natural for many people, myself included, to think, is this a kind of a moment like Bretton Woods, which itself succeeded the Great Depression and was a kind of a catalyst, the Great Depression, for thinking ambitiously about the need for reform. And the paper that I've presented, this paper essentially, in a sense, questions whether that was in fact the right way to think about the first G20 meeting and then the subsequent two G20 summits that we've had. It's led me back to look at the origins of the Bretton Woods meeting itself and to realize that there is never really a moment when everything is redesigned rapidly. Even the Bretton Woods conference itself was a process of quite slow and incremental change, 2 or 3 years of negotiation before you even get to the conference. And even before that, there's all kinds of precedents that led to the new ideas. And so I've increasingly been thinking that people, myself included, were setting the expectations too high of what the G20 could do right away. And what we are in fact seeing is much more incremental change and could be faster. Many people would like it to be more ambitious, but you can't really misread the history to say, well, why aren't you doing what you did at Bretton Woods, when they themselves took a lot of time and it was an incremental process. And that's the way history changes. It rarely changes in a single moment, at least with respect to redesigning the international financial system.
So we recognize that the UN system, the multilateral system, the Bretton Woods systems, they are in crisis, and we are asking for those institutions and the system to be reformed, to be strengthened. The UN functions, the multilateral institutions, and we want them to be more representative of today's power, today's presence of the BRIC countries and the emerging powers. And we want them to be reformed in terms of representativeness, more regulation or better regulation, in terms of giving more voice and prestige and access to the developing countries. But while they are not working, they are not reformed, and we know that it's a difficult process, we think that G20 can be the forum, can be this steering committee, can be the guide of the necessary reforms, or can set the tone, or can be the Amex, whatever but it's not going to substitute UN, but it can help, it can give direction. And I think it proved to be effective during the financial crisis. and it's an additional element that should be taken into account.
The big things that's occurred, as you would expect, given the proportion of the crisis, given the amount of taxpayers' money that's been spent, saving bankers who are never the most popular set of people, has been the politicization of financial regulation. And in a way, the problem that has caused has meant that we've started to get distracted in some of the technical problems of financial regulation and trying to deal with the populist backlash against the bankers who are blamed for causing the crisis.
This workshop is very interesting and very useful, and we talk a lot, very deeply, about the very important questions caused by the global financial crisis. About China, and I think there has been a very big change. Okay, that brought forth to China and to the relationship between China and the global economy. Okay, first of all, we see China attract attention to the world. As number one largest holder of the foreign reserve, mainly of the U.S. dollars. Okay, so I think that's give China some extra influence on the U.S. economy, on the U.S. dollars, as well as the global economy. Okay. Secondly, I think China is also become the one of the focus of debate. Okay, that it is about the global imbalance, or the global re-imbalancing. Okay, so I think that is that is the answer, for this question is yes or no. Okay, so I think that is that's a long story. Okay, so but definitely I think that is China has become one of the focus of the debate.
Of course, many of the people are dealing with it in technical terms, and this is very important. But there's also a diplomatic component that shouldn't be ignored. And I think when you look at the G20, you can see the G20 as a real result of a shock that propelled diplomatic work that perhaps we wouldn't have anticipated. And was probably, given the context that this is a George W. Bush administration, a lame duck administration, a sense that was probably they didn't either have the will or perhaps even some of the skill set to invite everybody to a G20 meeting and have it work. What we found, though, is quite the opposite, that the shocks, the catalytic component through the G20 brought people to Washington in November 2008, that it allowed some sort of preliminary meeting that built through London, built through Pittsburgh, that showed the G20 both as a crisis committee, but also as a putative steering committee for the world, and certainly for economic global governance.